gonna start singing the Living in Bronzeville theme song, and that's so incorrect. Hello, everybody. This is Carlie's Couch, the podcast, not Bronzeville's audio series.
Although you should check them out too.
Yeah, Bronzeville is fire. Season 2 is released. It's done. You can listen to all 6 episodes. If you haven't heard season 1, you can listen to all 16 episodes featuring everybody from Tracy Ellis Ross to Lorenz Tate to Fishburne to Mekhi Phifer now, LeVar Burton, a bunch of people. Anyway.
Oh, your homie.
I digress. Dog. No, yeah, LeVar's my dog. Shout out LeVar. Nice to see you every once in a while. Still gonna have that house party that was requested at some point. But that's neither here nor there. So we're so glad that you have been listening and going along with us for this journey. We're in our 100 and something episodes. And one of the things we started recently was giving a phone number for people to call in, leave us a voicemail so we can play. And we have another one we want to play today. If you would, Carlie, I'll let you introduce and play that.
Absolutely. So...
And I'm trying to find the number again so I can tell y'all. So if y'all want to leave one, let me actually do that first so we can just get into it after that. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can call 323-505-2030. So you can give us a call, let us know how awesome we are. But I'd prefer if you really asked a question or had a thought that you think would be helpful or interesting or something to think about would be fine as well.
Absolutely. I feel like we need a little jingle that gets stuck in people's heads.
Oh, yeah, we should.
We'll work on that. But until then, shout out to this voicemail that we got. So I'm going to play it.
Hi. So I had to make a really personal decision yesterday about something that is going to significantly impact my life. And I'm glad that you fell asleep so that we didn't get to talk, but I wanted to say, and you can count this as like a voicemail on the podcast if you want, but I listened to this week's episode and last week's episode, and especially hearing you talk about me specifically was kind of funny, just reflecting back on when that episode was filmed and where I'm at now, but I just want to say thank you for having such an amazing podcast, because it really did help me while I was processing, kind of get to the nitty-gritty root of what I needed to do for myself without asking anybody, because I didn't even I talked to Matt about it for a few minutes, and then I was like, I need to make a decision by myself. So thank you for walking in your light, girl. I love you.
Hey, so if you listened to last week's podcast, or the week before now, I guess, a few weeks ago, it was about not giving advice. That's so often our first reflex when people come to us with things. And we provided a framework to help you have deeper conversations and to be a better sounding board and resource for people in your lives. And the story that I mentioned is my best friend. And that was her, listening to the podcast. And it's so interesting because what I was going to tell her to do, quit her job, and what she wanted to do at the time was very vocal about, and I didn't. I just asked her questions and gave her space. She actually didn't end up quitting her job, and she realized that there were deeper issues that were making her feel like she wanted to quit, because she was actually running from facing something. And so by applying that framework to herself, by sitting with herself, she was really able to get down to, what her root issue was, and face that instead of just running and taking the easy way out, or our first thought, which we mentioned on the podcast. So often our first thought is not really the root issue. The thing we bring up, the thing we're complaining about, asking questions or talking about, is not actually the thing that we need to face. And so she took some time by herself and came to that decision.
Mm-hmm. Which, kind of made us think about when you have decisions to make, or when you're trying to process something, or just, come to some kind of epiphany, if you will. How do you know what to do? Really? Because sometimes, especially if it's something where it's one thing or the other, or should I do a thing? I feel like a lot of times we still can maybe talk to somebody or whatever, but it's your life and you still have to make that decision and be okay with that decision. And how do we do that? So that's kind of what brings us to today's episode about not being able to necessarily trust your instincts. And we're going to just have a conversation about instincts and how we can kind of shape them to be more reflective of, the things that we want to do, or the things that we know are best for us to do. I'm trying to stay away from saying like shoulds and like right and wrong, because it's not really that all the time. And, or, those just are definite words for a situation sometimes. But like, what are your thoughts on that? When you have decisions, like, what are you going to do?
And I'm trying to think of some big decisions, but it's like, some big life altering decisions that I've made, and even like smaller ones, but big ones, like going to business school, quitting my job, moving to LA, like choosing USC over, a couple of the other schools that I got into. Like all of those things is like, really, what did I lean into? What did I listen to? And it was myself. And that sounds like real, probably frou-frou, but it's like, I got a lot of good advice from people. I made a list and weighed the pros and cons, but at the end of the day, it was just really what felt right in my heart. And so like, kind of like, I don't know, myself, my intuition, my instincts, but I really had to sit with myself to get there and figure out what that really was. Cause I think our initial reactions often are not really in alignment with us.
And I think it's interesting how people make their decisions differently, because it's so funny that all the things you said are things I'm like, yeah, they weren't even like things I contemplated really. And so it's almost that sometimes also when you just do things, like you don't have to have all of that like back and forth and let me figure it out, let me think about it. Maybe like trusting your instinct, or being able to trust your instinct, is getting to a place where it's like, I want to do this. And you just kind of start doing it. Maybe, or I don't know if that, maybe that's not always a thing, but for going to grad school, for starting a job, for doing all of those things, I don't remember ever really like thinking about anything. I just went to this one place and that's where I want to go. Or I was like, yeah, I should do this. And I just started doing it. And I feel like anything that I did a lot of back and forth with, or like pro and con, or asking people, it's like I really did know the thing, and it just maybe wasn't what I was probably trying to do or hear. So, and that's kind of maybe what I'm getting to, that I think the more we deliberate around something, kind of only reflects that we're unsure in that space. And so how can you get more sure to where you feel like you can make that decision and then move forward?
That's so funny, because I was like, in asking that, like I knew what I wanted to do, but I was looking for some type of affirmation or confirmation, just because I hadn't really grown to trust my own voice in those spaces, or my own intuition or instincts, have you will, in these certain areas. I think there are a lot of things that you can do to, help strengthen your relationship with them and help sharpen your instincts rather. But something that you said I want to touch on before we move on, you were like, you can't always trust your instincts. What do you mean by that?
I think that your instincts, when we talk about instincts, so that everybody knows what page I'm on, because y'all might be like, that's not an instinct. But when I talk about instincts, I am referring to like those first kind of thoughts you get around something. Like I'm walking and I see this path and that path, and instinctually I'm like, yeah, that's a little shady over there. Perhaps that's an example. And so what I think is that your instincts are really more a reflection of your patterns, perhaps your biases. I think Professor Carlie says. And I just thought about biases based off of like, oh, that path is going past all these guys at the gas station. Like, I'm not going down that way. And I have done. I've totally crossed the street when it's like a gang of guys for no reason. A gang as in just a group of people. Anyway, so I think that it's just based off of what you've always done and or what your beliefs already kind of are. And so trusting your instincts, I think, sounds cool, but it's really just a reflection of what have I always done, or what feels comfortable, or what should I do? And I think that that can still be challenged.
Absolutely. In this sense, I would say, like, you walking down a path and something's like, go the other way. Probably trust that. I'm just going to roll with trust that. There's not a lot of deliberation around things like that. And my mom has raised me like that. So I've always done it. And I feel like it's kept me safe and away from a lot of shady situations. But I think sometimes we lean too much into our instincts whenever we're not aware of the thing that's causing that thought. For example, if your partner doesn't hit you back and you're like, oh, they're cheating on me, just because that's like a life experience that you've had. Or if you have abandonment issues, and so every time somebody, you know, doesn't answer your call, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they don't love me, and you kind of freak out. I think that is whenever using your instincts can be what is it called? Like not an excuse, but something where you're not using that moment to be self-aware, and you're just like, oh man, you know, like a woman's intuition. I think a lot of times people just use that as an excuse to like be scared and to move out of fear and to try to protect themselves.
Woman's intuition really just means y'all know men ain't shit, and so this is the direction like of what I think is happening. That's literally what it is. But also, unfortunately, it's a lot of times right. But again, like I've seen enough fucking Twitter conversations where people are talking about women's instinct or their instinct, and it's like, nah, really, you could tell like this is really a projection, like Carlie says, a projection of what you've seen, what you've experienced, what you have known, and not necessarily that your mind is like, I am all knowing about this thing. This is it. And it's not that. It's just your mind being like, oh man, I'm scared of this, or I've seen a lot of this, or, you know, telling yourself messages that then lead you in that direction.
And so I think it requires a lot of, if you're trusting your instincts, it requires a lot of self-awareness and knowing, you know, what your boundaries and what your values are, and like kind of what's in alignment with that.
So go into that a little bit more. So how do you know if you can trust your instincts? You were saying something about boundaries.
Boundaries and values, I think self-awareness and knowing yourself is key. So for example, if your partner doesn't hit you back and you know you've been cheated on, and you know, like for a large portion, you know, men ain't shit, or women, or whatever your values are, like being self-aware enough to know that you can have a conversation with your partner before following down that instinct and busting up somebody's windows or breaking up with them because they ain't hit you back, or making rash decisions in the moment, so you can kind of stop yourself and evaluate like, oh, what has our behavior been before this? You know, how has our relationship been? And kind of putting a pause on those things. So I would say putting them into perspective a little bit, just based on like where you are in your life. And I don't think that's necessarily like boundaries, but I think it is like knowing yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I would say you have to really know yourself to be able to trust yourself in general. And so, yes, that does come from knowing your boundaries, knowing your values. I was just asked the question the other day. Somebody texted me and was asking me, what are your values? And I was like, damn, I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to say right here? And I was like, you know, giving more than you receive. Or like, I was just saying some stuff. But I'm like, actually, I've never just thought about like, what are my values as far as like, I know some people have certain mantras or like codes that they're like, these certain things. And it's like, all right, I don't know. I mean, I could come up with something, but I don't have like a thing. Do you have one or something? Like a list of like, these are my values. Have you ever done that?
I think I had to do it in like some type of corporate training exercise. And
probably makes sense too, because now to
like
your point, yeah, we can't, we haven't.
I think we might have, but I feel like now we should. No, I know when we did defining your not your personal brand or anything like that, but defining. We have done one, defining your narrative or something like that. But like, I think we should come back and like maybe do a values episode. That might be cool.
Oh man, yeah, maybe, because it is one of those things. It's like, oh, I just thought I knew, but when I think about it, it's like, I don't know what to say, or like, what am I missing? Or like, my first instinct then was to Google and be like, you know, values, because I just like to Google stuff, because I'm like, what would people say their values are? Like, I think I literally did that, which is so crazy. But to be like, okay, what kind of things go into this? Like, if somebody's asking what my values are, like, I really just didn't know. But I know if you put a situation in front of me, I know what's right, what I think is right, but I also know what I might do, which may not always be the right thing. And so that does tell me like, oh, certain things aren't as important to me, or not as much of a value. And I think that's important to really know your values, not just so you can be able to trust yourself, but now, and this is now getting off the topic, but in your relationships with other people, it's like, if those things don't align, then you're kind of like, it's like always kind of a constant struggle. So maybe that is something we should put on the list for an episode coming up, something around values and how you create them would be nice, because then that'll maybe force me to make a list.
Hey, I like that. But something else that you said, or that maybe we were talking about before in this whole like knowing yourself, is like being able to check it against the patterns in your life. So if you have instincts about stuff, but you always have instincts that people gonna do you wrong, you probably should check yourself, because if it's always everybody else, most of the time it's you. And so I think those can be very misleading.
And a lot of those patterns, I think, probably go back to certain fears, like fear of abandonment, for example. Like if you're the type of person who gets real clingy in relationships and or like finds it hard to give people space, and you end up like doing too much. Like we were talking about this kind of in the Don't Force It episode. And it's like, if you have certain patterns that you do, really you're being governed by this thought that like, oh man, this person's going to leave, or oh man, what can I do? And it's like, no, that's going to make your instinct always be, they're leaving, they're going, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, And it's like, that's just not a healthy space to be in. It's very worrisome, very draining to be in a space like that. But also, I think a lot of times people, when they say trust your instincts, or when they're talking about trusting their instincts, they kind of usually like refer to, man, if you just can't get something off your head, or like if you really just, keep thinking about a thing, like, that means maybe you should do it. And I think that, again, it's like one of those things we say, but also it depends on like what that is and where it's coming from. So like an example of that could be, oh man, I can't shake like this thought that maybe I should move to DC because of X, Y, and Z, and how it's aligning with things I want to do and the people, and it's closer to home, or whatever it might be, right? So you might be thinking about that, and maybe you keep seeing stuff about DC, or maybe, just things seem to line up and be synchronistic, and so you're like, so maybe that means I should move. And it's like, maybe, but also that kind of just is saying that you're looking for confirmation to like what you're saying. You know how when you say stuff, all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere.
Your reticular activation system.
Yeah, exactly. And so in doing that, it's like, if you trust your instincts, like you could just be like, I'm thinking about this, and just start looking into it and start, making those moves. But that could also go the other way as well, using one of the examples like Carlie was kind of using, is that if you always have it in your mind, like, man, he's probably cheating, man, he's probably out somewhere, man, I don't know where he's at, and that's always kind of like what's on your mind, then I don't know if that necessarily means that's what's happening either, but that's the narrative that you want to prove right, and probably will prove right. I ain't gonna hold you, but again, so it's not just like, oh man, this my instincts telling me this. That's still just reflective of your patterns, and reflective of your beliefs and your narratives and your thoughts and all of those things. And you could probably listen to every other episode 1 through 143 or 142 to see like the ways that you can combat your thoughts and all of those things, right? But more in line with your instincts. Why is it important though to make sure that they're so aligned?
I think it's important. Like, what else are you going to trust? Because we talk a lot about, like, making sure, like, you are self-aware and you do all this. And that's because at the end of the day, like, you're the only person making these decisions for yourself. You're the only person choosing to take these work opportunities, or to move, or to be in these relationships, or even how you think and move throughout your day. Like, you're actually choosing everything. And so it's important to sharpen your instincts, so that as you're living life, you're living it in a way that is in alignment with who you want to be, or who you are, essentially, like your ideal self. And if you don't know who that is, like, you'll just get kind of tossed by the wayside of your own negative thoughts, or of bad advice from people who don't really know what's going on with you, or whatever. Or you'll just continue to live in these vicious cycles of your trauma and like your limiting beliefs and everything else. So it's so important to have better instincts so you make better decisions for yourself.
Maybe those are some not warning signs. Maybe those are some signals that there's some work you can do to trust your instinct more. If, what's the last thing you just said? If
vicious cycles.
If you find yourself in the same patterns with like different types of decisions, whether it's relationships, work stuff, whatever. So if you find yourself like you're still making those same decisions, it's probably a sign that you need to check like what your instincts are. And another thing I would say is, if you maybe find yourself looking outward, I don't know if I should say too much, but if you find yourself looking outward a lot for everything, like, oh, what should I do? You think I should do this? Do you think I should do that? And or waiting for signals from other people to do a thing, then that's probably a good sign that you need to calibrate your instincts so that you just know what to do. And I think that sometimes there's conversation you can have with yourself. So going even back to the very beginning of this episode and that one that we did on having deeper conversations, as we were listening to that with the intro, it also made me think like, oh, I can do this format with myself. And that will probably be very helpful if something's going on, if I'm thinking about something. Lex, what's on your mind? And just kind of say the first thing, which you reminded us isn't usually not the root of the problem. And like, you can ask yourself, and what else? And, and listen to yourself. I think being able to trust your instincts really means actually listening and hearing yourself, because a lot of times we're looking for other people to listen to us and be a mind reader and tell us what we should do and what we think, when perhaps we can take the time to be still and be with ourselves and ask ourselves these questions and really, answer them, whether that's writing or just, sitting down thinking or whatever. I think that could be interesting to try for yourself.
Absolutely. So that's something, like a challenge for you this week, is to try to figure out, how you're doing and what you're really focused on and what you're really worried about or thinking about or marinating on. Spending time with yourself. I laugh because I talk to myself all the time, like full blown conversations. Probably not mostly in public sometimes, but be like, Carlie, what's going on, dog? Like, why are you tripping right now? And have these conversations. So try that. Hit us up. Let us know how that goes. I also, just another quick thing about synchronicity and like reticular activation system, like seeing those things. I feel like anything you put your energy towards can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense. Either you keep telling your partner, yeah, I just feel like you cheat on me or whatever, until they end up doing it. Or you be like, man, I'm trying to move to LA. And so you start seeing all these things with LA. It's like whatever your brain is looking for. Not saying synchronicity doesn't exist, but saying like literally where you put your energy matters. And so that is another reason why it's so important to make sure that it's going towards like what you want it to and what's important to you.
And that really does happen, because that's happened to me before, where somebody would all they kept doing is telling me like a thing that they thought I was doing. And then when I had the opportunity, I was like, just like a man, which I guess I can't say because like a woman too. But my first thought was like, yo, I might as well like fucking do it, because like that's what they basically expect, or like that's what they think. Like, and it just how we even talked about with the forcing episode, like kind of pushed is away when you're putting that energy towards somebody, versus it might have been better to like just take a step back and chill and like let things just unfold and let them happen. But yeah, it's definitely self-fulfilling prophecy for sure. But that also doesn't mean, I don't think, that you can positive talk yourself into an awesome life per se. Like you can't just be saying stuff and then it's like, oh, that's just gonna pop off either. No. So yeah, I mean, we're not gonna get too frou on you, I don't think. But what are some other tactics then that can help us to be quicker with our instincts, and those be healthy instincts?
I would say, so the first one is self-awareness. We already talked in depth at that, so I'm not even going to further elaborate. I would say, go ahead.
I keep having thoughts and losing them immediately today. I'm so sorry. I was reading something earlier this week about self-awareness that I thought was interesting. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was because I don't want to mess it up. But something around... Oh, you know what? I know what it was. I'm sorry, Carlie. I'm taking away in the middle of your sentence. I was, how you be on Twitter and you type something and then you start looking like, does this actually make sense before I hit send? That's what I was doing. And I had drafted a tweet that said, man, self-awareness can really be draining sometimes. And I don't really hear people talk about that. But then I also thought about it. And I forget what I was questioning, but I started Googling. I was like, let me say that in the drafts, actually. And then I started Googling because I think I was thinking like, no, it's not the self-awareness that's draining. It's like the process of going from this pattern to the other pattern. And then so I started to Google stuff around self-awareness. And one of the first thing I saw was they're like, self-awareness is just like the being. It's not like you probably don't have self-awareness as much if it's like all of this back and forth. I'm kind of trying to make a point, but I say that to say, in the same way we're talking about like our instincts as well, like for something to be instinctual and it's like, oh, okay. Really like this whole self-awareness thing, like if it's a drain, and when we talk about self-awareness, and sometimes for us it's like this back and forth and back and forth, I think it's almost like that's because we're trying to practice to get to that, to a space where it's like you don't have to have all of that back and forth. So when we're saying like it's important to be self-aware with our instincts, it made me want to read more about self-awareness and what it really is. It's just knowing what state you're in, kind of. But in knowing and us saying you should be self-aware to have clearer instincts, I think what we're saying there is to understand your patterns and understand what some of those beliefs are that might be keeping you from that. That was totally a random aside about self-awareness.
Well, it's not, I mean, that's not an aside. I have like a perfect example. So if, and then saying you know yourself, and that's the work. We talk about the work often, and the pauses and the self-awareness and the self-love, and really getting to the core of who you are and understanding your predispositions. So, you know, like what lenses you're looking at stuff through. But the more you do that work, the easier like being in the moment is. And for example, if I've done work to figure out, you know, what my values are, what is in alignment with my job, what do I want to do, what kind of person do I want to be, who am I, how do I want to live my life? So whenever a job opportunity presents itself and it's like, we want you to move to Alaska. No, I'm good. But I can answer that automatically, not because Alaska's not beautiful. I've seen pictures. I do want to go visit, but because like I don't want to live somewhere that's like that. I can't live somewhere where the weather's that gray. Like it affects my mood. It affects all these things. I don't care how much money it is. Like, oh, so now I know that because I'm not driven by money. And so it doesn't matter what you throw on top of that. Like, I'm good. Or you can kind of look at, nah, sis,
I'm get some lamps in the crib now for a couple meals. We can make that work.
But see, even for me, I'm like, nah, I'm gonna get my meals somewhere else.
That's true. And that's another point too, is that when we don't have ourselves set, or like our values and all these different things set, now it's like we're just like floating with whatever, kind of like, I guess, look, so I'm the one who don't have no values apparently. So here I am like, yeah, I'm gonna take that bread and figure it out type thing. So I guess that also kind of makes it clearer to know what your instincts are. Otherwise, no wonder I'm like deliberating so much, because I don't have certain things that are like set, you know, for me to default to.
Mm-hmm. And if you know yourself, then you're able to trust your instincts. Like, I knew I wanted to move to LA. I knew I didn't want to go to the other schools, but I felt the responsible thing to do. And the thing I should be doing is taking my time and deliberating. And it's like, why was I even doing that to myself when I knew at the core that's not what I wanted to do?
Yeah, I'm just not a deliberator. If I'm deliberating something, I'm only practicing procrastination. Like, yeah, because I
don't really deliberate either when I'm being myself.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, it's like you just know, like, all right, I want to do this. Unless I just don't have any like say. Sometimes, a lot of times, I'm just like, I don't really care about certain things. So it's like whatever. I think another tactic in sharpening your instincts is meditation. And lately, there's all kinds of different types of meditation for sure. And one of the things that happens in meditation that is more on the mindfulness side, I would say, is that, you know, you're noticing the things that come up, and that can help maybe inform what your beliefs have been, your values have been, whether they're where they should be or whether they are where they shouldn't be. So maybe some things and thoughts can come to you that way. But to be more specific, lately I have actually been doing more intentional meditations with certain like areas of my body, for example, like wanting to like open up my heart area, open up like my solar plexus and all of those things. And when you're doing those meditations, what they're telling you to do is to really like breathe into those spaces and to visualize the space and see the light, you know, grow. And it sounds a little like cuckoo, but also it's very interesting because you go into this setting and an intention that like, yo, I want to show me, you know, where I'm blocked at right now. Like, show me the block, show me what's moving, show me what's not really moving. How does it really feel in certain spaces? And with asking yourself kind of questions and really like listening to your body, perhaps really you are kind of filtering through what your thoughts are about that, space, or about what's blocking you or draining you or empowering you. But I think it's really just so intentional in doing that you're sitting there and just like really feeling yourself, that those ideas and those thoughts kind of come to you and they show you. I forget which chakra I was trying to do the other day, but like I kept seeing like half of it. I'm like, oh man, I feel like it's telling me like I really need, there's some parts of myself that I'm not seeing enough. And so, like you just start getting these ideas and it's like, you just write that stuff down and it's like, oh, it kind of makes sense. And you can kind of see how it aligns with different things. Some spaces are way more open and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And then some places are way, way blocked where it's like, oh man, I'm not really feeling much here or getting much here. And now it's like, well, what kind of things can I do to open up this space or open up, this type of energy in my body? And so I think a lot of the chakra work and a lot of that type of meditation is really good for kind of feeling yourself and getting to know yourself and like doing a check-in on where you are in a lot of spaces.
Mm-hmm. And that intentional time with yourself is so important. Like the conversation from the beginning that we shared to Lexi talking about meditation, like whenever you take that time, that intentional time, not like chilling watching Netflix, but like that intentional time for yourself, you're really able to see where you are on things. So I think that's a great way.
And I've really always thought that was kind of silly. I didn't know much about it, but I almost think too, even without like really trying to like study it or whatever, it's actually literally about just like setting an intention to make something clear. Like you can really be like, all right, this thing is going on. I just want to take some time to get clear on it. I really want to see what's going on. And like to really just sit still and let your mind focus on that I think it is something to that. Like you really get answers. But again, like I think we focus so much on asking and looking and trying to find a sign that it's like you're not really seeing, what you really feel about a thing.
I was reading a book, I can't remember which one the other day, but it was saying like that you can't really learn something that you don't already inherently know. And for me, it's like, man, as I read these things in this book, it's like, man, I already know this. I just hadn't put it in these words.
Like that's why it connects.
Yeah, like that's why it connects so deeply with me. And so, sitting with things by yourself gives you a chance to really connect with that part. And I don't think that in our society we're ever championed, especially Western society, to ever really just sit still and to not do. We're always, or to not be doing something. We're always got to go do this, do that, or you're not worthy, whatever. So by giving yourself a chance to be, you can unlock all those things inside of yourself. And that's really where your power is. I think another intentional exercise that you can use to sit with yourself is if you are contemplating something and kind of going back and forth with it, choose one for a whole day or a whole week or an hour or whatever. Choose a decision. Like, okay, you know what? I am going to move to DC and see how you feel. See what your thoughts are. Maybe like
start planning it out.
Yeah, start planning, looking for apartments, looking for whatever.
That's good.
And then just like sit with it and see how you feel, because it's like flipping a coin. Like if you know you really want to move to DC, but you're waiting for somebody to give you the okay, if you flipped a coin, like I'm going to move or I'm not going to move, and it lands on the not going to move, you're going to be sad. And it's like, so you can kind of use your emotions and your feelings about something, your instincts as a guiding system to making your own decisions. Because, like Lexi knows me and we have a lot of deep conversations, but there's no way she can know everything that's going on inside of me, no matter how close we are or how deep of conversations we have. So like, only I know that. And if I give myself a week of, I'm not going to move to DC and I'm like sad and I'm like, man, I feel stuck here. I don't want to be here. By the end of the week, you already know what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a cool exercise, especially when it comes to like those types of decisions about doing a thing or trying something. That's really good. I think another thing to do by yourself sometimes is allowing yourself to really feel. So if you have a decision you're faced with or just something that's going on, like really acknowledging your feelings, which I think sometimes when like even just using the same example, like when we're asking other people about stuff or venting about something or whatever, it's like you're kind of being like, tell me how I should feel to other people, versus like you really sitting down and letting yourself feel sad or feel angry or like, man, how do I feel right now? And touching base with that and be like, I feel kind of jealous. I feel kind of scared of something. And then recognizing sometimes from allowing yourself to feel that, or to at least define kind of what you're feeling, to now recognize like, oh man, this is what has been motivating my moves, or this is what should motivate or could motivate my moves, depending on what it is. So I think, a lot of times it's like we want to just like make a decision or just like trust your gut real fast. But it's like, no, take time and let yourself feel like these decisions, or feel what's happening, so you can see, how you want to move forward, and then what kind of cloud of feelings you want to be in moving forward. Because if you're even just maybe thinking about DC or meditating on it or whatever, notice how you feel. Because you may not like the feeling, or why you feel that way. Going back to your friend's call, I guess it was something about, you were saying like quitting her job or not type of thing. And so it's like, okay, your first instinct might be that you want to leave, or that you're placing the feelings on the job, but in closer, inspection of it, the feelings are really coming from something else. And so like really sorting that out can maybe help you figure some things out.
Absolutely. And seeing if you're being guided by fear. Because I think anytime you're being guided by fear, that's not a good thing. People are like, oh, fear is good because it keeps you from dying. Outside of that, like, it's not really that great of a thing. And I challenge you to look at things in your life from that lens. So if you notice you're scared of missing out, if you're trying to do something, because this is the only opportunity you're ever going to get, watch your words and watch how you're talking to yourself about it. And then the last one, I think, is just to be present, because there's nowhere else that, well, first of all, really exists. Time is a construct. We can talk about that later, but the present moment's really all that you have. And so taking your time in the present to check in with yourself, to be there, to sit with it, just to see how you're doing.
And I would agree with that. So I would say that some of the takeaways from this conversation would be that it's important to be able to listen to yourself and make decisions, but it's also important for us to examine our instincts and understand what they're branching from, and understand if perhaps that's some of the work we need to do to get to a place where our first reactions or our gut, thoughts or whatever are coming from a more constructive or positive place, to be able to even trust them in the first place. And that to do a lot of these things requires us to know ourselves, which requires us to take time by ourselves, with ourselves, and really knowing who we are and what's important to us and what we value. So all of those things together allow for you to make decisions and to move forward in life in a way that is going to make you feel happy about what you're doing, in a way that will be aligned with what you care about, and in a way that, it's probably just a little bit less work. Like you're walking in where you need to be walking. And so that is like the power of being able to trust your instincts. Really, maybe trusting your instincts just means I know myself. And so I know myself so well that, yeah, I want that, or yes, I want to go here, or yes, this is working, or no, this is not working for me. And being able to do that with confidence.
That's all, folks.
Right, that was a good wrap up.
I was like, whoop. I was gonna add on, but no, she got that. All right, so let us know how that goes this week. That was fire. That should just be the episode, if I'm being honest. Like that was a cliff notes. Just a little reel that we can just chunk up. If you're not following us, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Carlie's Couch. This week we have a shout out. Do you want to give it?
Yes, we want to shout out Cynthia Gonzalez
with
an S. She has been doing a lot of great work with her production design company. And she has been doing a lot of stuff and growing in this space, but she's so good. She's so good. I can't wait. I'm about to drop one of the projects she did the production design for in a few weeks as well. And, just shout out to her and her company, because I think you were saying that you saw she just did one of her first network jobs for a network. And people think it's so simple to like have the right background set and the mood set, but like she really gets into it. There's so much intention and meaning in all the pieces that she gets together. And there's a lot, just even go out and buy and shop sometimes. to bring out the vision of a director and the DP and the whole crew for some of these projects. And so super important, the work she's doing. Do you remember what her Instagram is?
Synthesis Production Design.
Synthesis Production Design. Yeah, so check it out. Her work's really good. She's a dope artist in general and has a lot of love, life, energy.
More love, more life.
Yeah, she definitely does. I love Sin.
Me too.
So yeah, congratulations to her for all the work that she's really doing and seeing that come to fruition. I think there's not many things better than, really having a talent and it actually being able to get used and seen and, admired by others around you. So that's such great work.
Love to see people walking in their gifts and flourishing.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. Real quick, another shout out. We were talking about chakras. Sin also plays sound bowls. And I'll link her stuff on here. If you've never been to a sound bath, there's one that she did online that opens your heart chakra. And it's tuned to that frequency. And if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, just go check it out and have your life changed. They're amazing.
And can I just come up with a question, or do you already have another one?
Nope, you got that. So how long you question, lady?
So I would say our question of the week is, name one thing that fear is keeping you from right now.
One thing that fear is keeping me from, oh, ouch, this one hurts. One thing that fear is keeping me from right now is launching a couple of business things and completing a project.
That's good. Well, that's not good. That's not good. And I would say one thing that fear has been keeping me from doing is properly, I don't want to say ending. So mine would be around like relationships with people. And I would say it's keeping me from moving people into a different category or bucket in my life and trying to hold on to certain things. But yeah, it's been some things where it's I need to kind of find some more people in a certain space, and then certain people, it's man, y'all just really draining me right now. So I think that, because that's something that I've been thinking about in different spaces, not just romantic or friends or whatever, but just in different types of work spaces sometimes too, where it's man, you're just kind of scared to let people go or, operate with people because you're thinking about their feelings, or you're thinking about, you want to hold on to something because you've had it going so long. But I think it's important to trust your instincts if you can and do something different in both of these spaces. So even with work stuff, it's trust your instincts and your evidence that, oh, well, I got these opportunities for a reason, and just dive into it perhaps. What if you could, and maybe you can, but what if you could step into, that thing as that person, oh yeah, I'm that person who does this, and feel that type of energy as you're going into something. I think that makes things easier to do and more successful. And essentially it's who you want to be, and you kind of can put on this pretend mask to get it done. But the more you do that, because even Beyonce has an alter ego, but the more you do that, you actually are getting things done. You are stepping into that space. It's almost we got to trick ourselves sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Or just the other way, it's you're that good, but you got that fear, man, the imposter syndrome. Shout out to Stevon. Mm-hmm. Man, what if I fuck up, or what if this happens?
Stevon.
Exactly. F you. But yeah, it's just walking in. It's so funny because I had to record some videos.
It's really my enemy
to
right now.
do some things, and I had to step into it. It's I was so nervous before, and I was setting up the stuff fuck, I don't do this, and turn on the camera hey y'all, ain't nothing wrong. Today. Exactly, we gonna be here.
That's funny. That is how I be damn, I ain't never did this project before, but I'm gonna sell it real quick. But that's what life is. Sometimes it's just figuring things out as you go, as long as that thing is the thing you actually do want to be doing. Sometimes we just we're gonna take on something just to be taking it on, but if that's something that you want to be doing or something you enjoy, it's all right, you just gotta step into it and learn and go through the process.
Trust the flow.
Yeah, trust the flow. Thank you for listening this week. Leave us a comment if you enjoyed this episode, if you got anything out of this episode. Remember, we gave you a couple of homeworks throughout this episode, so hopefully you try that. Spend some time with yourself this week and see where you are with trusting your instincts.
Hit us up and let us know how it goes. We'll see y'all next week.
Adios.